welcome back. If you're new to my channel, hi, I'm Anusha and I'm currently in my first year of medicine at King's College London, and this is the second of a series of videos that I've made that will hopefully help some of you guys with Bmat prep. Now this video specifically talks through section 1 of the exam and some of the tips that I learned along the way. I would like to apologise in advance for any Bmat flashbacks that this might bring back, but it is what it is. Now usually Bmat section 1 is an hour-long exam. It's multiple choice and handwritten, whereby you fill out your answers in an answer sheet, and it has 35 questions. Now I'm saying usually because this year there have been a few changes to the exam due to COVID-19, but I'm going to be going through all of those changes in my video. Essentially it's designed to test your aptitude skills, focusing on 3 main areas, which are problem solving, understanding the argument, and data analysis and inference. The 3 main types of reasoning that they focus on are mathematical, spatial and verbal. Bear those in mind when looking at the different question types because they'll try to involve an equal number of questions for each type. This year section 1 will be 32 questions instead of 35, but you'll still have an hour to complete it. The test format will remain the same, however this time instead of using a pen and paper you'll be sitting online, so similar to the UCAT. You will still get tested on problem solving and critical thinking, but this year you won't get tested on data analysis and inference questions as well as the conclusive type questions. What I mean by this is that the combination type questions will be dropped, and basically you'll focus more on the question types where you're needed to pick out the right answer out of 4 or 5 options, rather than trying to read a paragraph and conclude what the argument is or what the flaw is. Now the first of these sections that I want to go over is problem solving. There's no calculator for this exam, so you have to rely on your mental maths. We move. That's why the first thing that I'd say is prepare your mental maths. Now a lot of the questions have fractions, percentages, decimals. They ask you to look at graphs, analyse data, so being able to recall that quite quickly is really useful. Similarly, be able to convert easily between fractions, decimals and percentages. I know that sounds like a lot of maths, but in the long run it'll be really beneficial for you when you want to save time and go back to those questions that might be slightly hard to prepare for, or on the day you're finding quite difficult to tackle. Other examples of conversions that might be good to know are things such as imperial to metric, so miles to kilometers, pounds to kilograms, things like that, as well as knowing how many seconds in a minute, how many minutes in an hour, how many hours in a day, etc., and standard form. These things will really save time for you in the exam. Estimate. For section 1 in general, the questions are a lot longer than for section 2, which I'm going to be going over in another video, but for this instance you want to save as much time as possible to focus on questions that you might not be able to prepare for. With estimation, always look at the answer options to guide you. So once you've read the question, look at the answer options and see how much of a difference there are between them. For example, if the answers are 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million and 5 million, you'll know that you have more scope to estimate. However, if the answers are like 4.31, 4.32, 4.33, you'll know where you stand in terms of how much you can estimate and how much you'll have to take that into consideration when you've got your answer. Spatial awareness is really key. Obviously the questions vary yearly for the Bmat, so it's really hard to predict exactly what's going to come up, but usually there's always some sort of net or 3D visualization question. So what I would do is take a rubber into the exam or take small parts of rubbers into the exam. This is what I did. And so if you do have, for example, a net question that comes up, on the sides of the rubber you can draw the different sides that are on the net, and that way when it comes to the question you have a 3D representation in front of you that you'll be able to use for those of you that might find it more difficult to visualize that. But of course that's different for everyone. Note down your mistakes and look at the explanations. Now revision is a time to be making mistakes because then you'll remember the mistakes that you've made and try to avoid them next time. In terms of resources to use, the ISC medical book was amazing. I used it for the Bmat and the UCAT, but for the Bmat I got the 700 questions one. I'll plug the link for that somewhere below. There are so many questions for you to do. It pushes your reasoning. Questions can be a little bit more difficult than the exam itself, but I think that's really good because it'll prepare you. I'd also recommend the Bmat papers. Now there are so many of them on the website, all with different sections for you to try out, but I wouldn't suggest trying them out until you've done a few questions from the book, just so that you can familiarise yourself with the questions. Now the other section I'm going to be talking about is decision making and critical thinking. Now one thing I'd say about this subsection of section 1 is that it's very similar to the UCAT verbal reasoning section. So if you did sit the UCAT and you did prepare for that, then look over the notes for that and how you best approached it. Use a methodical and tactical approach with the questions and be able to rule out any obviously wrong answers. Even if you're stuck and you're able to cut down your options to 2 or 3, you have a half or 1 1/3 chance of getting it right. Brush up on reading newspaper articles or any sort of long text so that you're used to reading quickly and being able to pick up key bits of information which you can then use when you're looking for an answer. It will also help you to identify unreliable, ambiguous forms of information and data which you can then pick up on and essentially rule out as an answer. One resource that I used was the OCR AS Critical Thinking textbook. Now for me, since I didn't take any essay directed subjects for A-level, it was really good for me not only for section 1 but also for section 3 because it allowed me to rethink about how I would plan an essay, how I would write it, what kind of language I would be looking for, as well as helping me to read and understand for section 1. I shall also plug the link for that below. The TSA Oxford papers are also really good. While using this resource, I realised that the questions are really similar to section 1 in terms of the style of questions and the formatting, but the questions can be slightly harder sometimes. These essentially test your verbal and spatial reasoning. Now, just for the sake of including it, data analysis and inference are also usually included in Bmat, but this year it won't be. I'll be going into more detail about that in another video because usually it's quite a broad subject and there's quite a few question types that they can cover, so I'll be going into more detail about that separately. Now, there's no best way to prepare for the Bmat, and by no means are my tips the only ones you need, but I've racked up a list of top tips for section 1 that will hopefully be useful for some of you guys and will help with revision as well as how best to tackle the exam questions for section 1. Unlike section 2, where you need at least basic GCSE knowledge of maths, biology, chemistry and physics, for section 1 no prior knowledge is required, so literally practice, practice, practice. Use the ISC medical book, use the TSA Oxford papers, use the TSA Cambridge papers, use the Bmat prep papers. You'll have plenty of questions there to be able to practice, and hopefully that will help you with getting into the routine of familiarising yourself with the questions as well as doing them under time conditions. All the questions are worth the same number of marks, so don't spend too long on the longer questions. Go through the rest of the paper, answer the easier, shorter questions, and then come back to the longer ones at the end so that you can gain quick and easy marks. One thing that I did was I flicked through the paper initially and I kind of kept in mind the questions that I knew I could do instantly, and after doing those I then went back to the ones that I thought would be slightly harder to do but still I could do quite quickly, and then I increased it in terms of difficulty. That helped me with being able to answer as many questions as I can and being as efficient as possible, but of course it's different for everyone and this is just a tip. Periodization is key, and what I mean by that is revising in 55-minute chunk blocks. This is really useful because in the exam you're going to want to aim to have 55 minutes of just doing the questions and 5 minutes to go back, check any questions that you might have missed out, fill out the answer sheet, make sure you've answered every question because you might as well, you're not going to lose anything. And so by doing that, it will really help you with time management, familiarising yourself with the content, as well as just knowing how you work in the environment and adapting yourself based on that. So things like signposting how much time you have left, when you have half the time left, when you have a quarter of the time left. I'll also be releasing more information about my section 2 and section 3 videos that are coming out very soon on my Instagram page, which is at my GKT monologues, if you want to check it out. So yeah, those are the tips that I have for Bmat section 1. I'll make sure to put the links for the resources down below, and I'm hoping that there are some things that you can take away from this video while preparing for your exam. If you're sitting the exam this year, best of luck. And yeah, if you thought that the video was useful, please make sure to leave a thumbs up. If you think that my channel will be useful for you or you're liking the content so far, please make sure to hit that subscribe button for more content. And yeah, stay tuned.